Y2K, latest feature film from A24. It actually premiered earlier this year at the South by Southwest Film Festival. Director Kyle Mooney, I believe that this is his second feature film. He's long been acting. He's been an actor for quite a while, and he's decided to tap into directing and writing. And so this is now his second feature film. This is a disaster sort of comedy horror film. It's blending multiple genres, and it takes place at the turn of the year 2000, from 1999 going into 2000, when at that particular point there was the whole idea of the year 2000 problem, the idea that Y2K would happen and technology would essentially turn on us and take over the world, and there would be a mass crash of just all technology. Devices would go down, satellites would crash. It was long speculated that everything was going to be apocalyptic, to say the least, at the turn of the year 2000. Basically, this film is saying, hey, what if that actually happened? What if there was an actual crash out of all technology and they turned on us and we had to fight back? And so that's what this film is ultimately about. This is a movie we got a chance to check out this past weekend. So pass it to you, man. What'd you think about this brand new A24 film, Y2K?
Man, I love the premise of this film. Everything you just said. Y2K is actually happening, where technology actually turned on the world. I was interested in that movie, man. I was really excited to see that movie because, like A24 too. It's going to be kind of raunchy. What's going to happen. People are definitely going to die, and those things are present and prevalent in the movie, but I wanted to like it, and I simply don't. I do not like this movie. This movie, I think this movie again has some good ideas, but it plays so much on the idea of what Y2K is and the technology, and it's trying so hard to kind of be this thing that is nostalgic, that it like gives up the story for the most part, and a lot of those beats in the story feel either they feel done before, or they're not interesting enough for me, or things are just falling by the wayside. That made me kind of yawn and go, okay, but why am I here again? The movie starts off very super badish, and I'm like, okay, cool, like very book smart, like, okay, we've seen these characters, the archetypes of these characters before. This isn't a new thing for us. Where are you going? And I feel like every time it went somewhere, it wasn't somewhere that I was I think I was excited to see, but I was let down every single time. It was like, nope, you thought you had it, but you didn't quite have it. And Y2K is also interesting because to me, and this might not be true, but to me, Y2K kind of felt like it was, although it is a Y2K movie, this is for the millennials. It's like it felt like it was aiming towards some like Gen Z in the way they made the movie. But I'm like, they don't know about Y2K. Why are you marketing it towards them? I don't know. It felt weird in those terms too. Another thing that didn't work for me in this film, the characters, there's a lot of hip hop in the characters. The characters love hip hop. Like that's their thing. Like Y2K in this movie is like, I'm going to talk with a certain thing. I like to rap. I like hip hop music. Music is important in this way. I got a certain swag to me. And the reason that's weird for me is there are like no black characters in the movie. And I'm like, man, this feels very cosplay to me. Like, why are all of these characters like this? And there's not one black person in the movie to address it, or at least joke about it, at least in the way that you think this is funny. And so a lot of it did end up being funny for me. A lot of it didn't really feel as nostalgic as I was hoping that it would feel. And unfortunately, the movie just fell kind of flat for me. I think there's some good, fun movie making things here that I did enjoy. There's some weird Y2K stuff. I'm like, okay, that was a cool idea. There's also some cool deaths here. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But for the most part, by and large, I did not enjoy this movie, and I had a lot of issues with it.
I vividly remember Y2K and the conversations around it. I was still really young, but I definitely remember all of the hesitation and just the apprehension that society had that this was going to be a possibility. And then, of course, the new year comes and nothing happens. Everything is fine, which is typically the case when we talk about apocalyptic dates that are sort of impending. But that concept it's cool. And now we've reached the place, 25 years later, where like that's ripe for a retelling. That has now become nostalgic territory. I think that's why they marketed to Gen Z, because Gen Z did not exist and they did not experience it. So this is something that would be new to them. That's like the idea of like, oh, we're doing something like kind of original, but not really at the same time. Like, this is obviously a concept that people live through, but for a new generation who didn't go through this, maybe they'll want to see what it's all about. Like, what was that? I did hear about that maybe a couple of times in textbooks. they did that to us when we were young. You know, when they're marketing movies from the 80s and the 70s and they have a
Yeah.
nostalgic bent, you know, we didn't go through that stuff, but there might be
Yeah.
some interest in learning about that particular time period. But you know, in the execution of this movie, it mostly does not work. You know, a lot of it doesn't work, and there's some decent performances. I do think Julian Dennison is pretty funny for the most part in his role, though he's not in it enough. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think that what I do like is a lot of the practical stuff that they did, because it is like somewhat of a horror movie. There's a lot of practical stuff that they do. They build out some crazy technological machines. There's some weird sci-fi stuff. I really like that, because I like that there's like
Yeah.
some craftsmanship on display. It feels very old school and tactile in that way. They don't resort to just like some lame CGI tricks. There's CGI in it for sure, but a lot of the stuff that you would want to feel real, I think that they certainly leaned into
Mm-hmm.
that. And I like that. And I like the construction and sort of the idea that they are sort of going on a journey. Like you end up in one place and you have to like go somewhere else. It is post-apocalyptic in that way. It's almost like this is the end, when that, you know, that world is ending, and all of a sudden it's going to set you off on this adventure, you know, across, not
Mm-hmm.
across the country, but across the town that you're in. And so you'll just run into all sorts of crazy shit along the way. And one of the crazy things that they do run into in this film is Fred Durst, who is in this movie, you know, who was the lead singer, the lead rapper of Limp Bizkit. And, you know, to your point about the you know, sort of the hip hop stuff that's implemented, and, you know, sort of some of the slang and all of that that the characters are using, I think that that's intentional. Like, I think because Limp
Yeah.
Bizkit were a rock band that was also
Mm-hmm.
rapping,
Rapping.
I
Yeah.
think that was definitely a part of the conversation in the culture. Like, who's this white boy that's rapping? You know,
For sure.
that's not Eminem. That was the same conversation with Kid Rock, and I think that they're intentionally doing that. Like, yeah, there's no black people around to check them about like, why are you leaning so heavily into hip hop culture and
Mm-hmm.
slang and all this stuff, and
I
like you
thought
don't
that'd have
really
been
come from
funny.
that. But you know, I think it's probably more funny if you don't acknowledge it, because that was like an active part of the culture. Like, people were just doing it and they weren't
Yeah.
getting checked about it. Like, we weren't in a place where
Mm-hmm.
people were like, oh, you shouldn't do that, or that's not really you, that's not that authentic. Like, that was just kind of a thing, and that was a whole culture because people did
Mm-hmm.
listen to Limp Bizkit and they followed Fred Durst. Like, that was their number one rapper. And I think people who really come from that, they're like, dude, that's a fucking joke. Like, that's not even serious.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But either way, like, a lot of the comedy doesn't really land. It's not that funny, unfortunately. You want this movie to be funny. You want it to be wild. They do have a lot of wild things that do happen, but it's just nowhere near as funny as it needs to be. It's not as scary as it should be, because there are horror elements. Like, it just doesn't do any of those things exceptionally well. It does all of them just like slightly okay. I think the
Mm-hmm.
best thing that it does is create, you know, some of those more practical things, and it gives them like a journey to go on, and it really puts them through the ringer. Like, the characters do go through some shit, and I like that. Like, it's not an
For
easy
sure.
film for them to last and survive through. But that's kind of really it. There's nothing else that really stands out about it, which is unfortunate, because I had a lot of high hopes about this movie. But yeah, those are all of our thoughts on Y2K, the brand new A24 film. If you've checked this out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.